So welcome
Hi.
everyone. This is the Bold Strokes Books New England authors get together, Friday night get together, and we're so happy you could all be here to join us. My name is Laney Weber and my co-host tonight is C. Spencer. And let's start with introductions. I'm gonna go around and ask about your books and where you're from. Would C. Spencer like to start?
So thanks everybody for coming. I'm C. Spencer. I'm co-host tonight. A little background about me. I grew up in Southern California and I went to college and studied English literature and kind of fell in love with Robert Frost and Henry David Thoreau. And I pictured New England as steeple churches and maple trees and snow in 4 seasons and fell in love with that. So after I graduated, I packed my car and moved to Vermont, where I lived for 10 years. And I met my wife online while I was living in Vermont. And soon we moved to Western Massachusetts, where we currently reside. I have 2 books out, Truth or Dare and On Second Thought, both contemporary lesbian romance. And the settings are largely influenced by my surroundings here in New England, small town settings. Who wants to go next? Fiona.
I am Fiona Riley. I'm from Boston originally, and I didn't go very far. I'm still in Boston. I went to school here, and I moved to a suburb of Boston. I'm about 15 minutes from Fenway Park on a good day. Less time now that everyone's sort of scattered out of the city. But I write contemporary lesbian romance, and my newest release is actually called Bet Against Me. It just came out on September 1st. It's the start of a new series, and it's about a luxury realtor in a competition between 2 different competing realty firms. So most of my books, with the exception of one, I have 7 published, I believe, are all based in Boston or New England. The one I'm working on now is the sequel to this book, and it's called Bet the Farm, and it takes place in Maine and in Boston. It's split half and half. So I spend a lot of time writing about Boston, and as a matter of fact, this is the actual skyline of the seaport, and I had that put on the cover because I'm such a Bostonian all the way through. What about you, Jane? You next?
Sure. What a Boston nerd you are, Fiona. And I can say that because I'm not from here. I do live in Boston now, but I'm actually from upstate New York. Shout out to BSB's headquarters. I went to school in oh my goodness, I'm seriously having the worst case of COVID brain. I did go to school, I promise, in Western Massachusetts. Actually, I went to school at the same place that Jessie Thoma went to school, and we sort of like didn't really know each other, but we kind of connected through BSB. So anyway, I love it out in Western Mass. It's just like the openness of it. And one of my first book was set in fictional Western Mass, sort of like the UMass area. And I'll show you a picture of it. It looks like this, the universe between us. And it's, so yeah, that was the one that I just like kind of, it's my sort of like love letter to Western Mass because I don't live there anymore and I will always miss it. My newest books are Uninvited and then Convergence, and they are queer sci-fi speculative fiction, sort of, actually taking place partly where I actually grew up in upstate New York. So yeah, so I'm here now. I'm here with my chickens and my cats and my wife, and you know, hunkering down in quarantine.
Notice she mentioned the chickens first.
You got it, Holly. You go next.
Okay, well, I'm a native New Englander. I was born not far from Boston. Lived in Duxbury till I was 6, and then moved up to Seacoast, New Hampshire, where I've lived ever since. Other than a brief 6-month stint in Long Beach, California, which ended up being partially an inspiration for my first book, which was Songs Unfinished. And worked various retail jobs and administrative jobs. Writing kind of came to me literally in a dream when I dreamt up a story and woke up and said, I want to write that down. And then from there, spent several years learning how to write, just self-taught, reading a ton. My first love is music. And I still play guitar and sing and do a lot of stuff with music. But writing has just kind of become a hobby that turned into something that's like all of these wonderful friends and this great community and everything. So that's kind of my story, I guess.
Frizz, you're up.
Me.
Ready? You're up.
CF Frizzell. I'm a Boston girl. I'm living in the Cape right now, but probably 3 or 4 or 5, 6 different locations in the interim between Boston and the Cape in the past many years. My background is in weekly newspapers, community journalism, for about 20 years. I finally saw the light and realized there's no future money there, no retirement plans, especially when you own your own newspaper, and 3 of us got together and did that. But I went for bigger bucks and more stability and joined the phone company of all things, and spent about 20 years there too. It was an introduction back into the city, which I wasn't always. I'm not a city girl. I'll say one thing, working in Boston and commuting, which was always a trip, led to my first novel. Just walking past an abandoned hardware store from the 20s or 30s, sandwiched between Boston skyscrapers in the financial district. Always, every day walking by it made me stop, and every day I wondered more and more what it would have been like back in the day. And I ended up just concocting a story about prohibition in Boston, and putting a young woman who's begins her life as, well, the story begins as she's a teenager and brings her through that period and into craziness of the 20s and the gangs that were involved in Boston at the time. That was, I guess, the inspiration, and I'm grateful for working in Boston to lead me in that direction. But since then, I've done a couple contemporary romances. Night Voice, which is based in Provincetown, Nantucket Rose, obviously in the island of Nantucket. And I guess the one we do out in June is Measure of Devotion, which really has its roots in Plymouth, Massachusetts, but it is centered around Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Yes, my New England roots are pretty deep. From everything, elevated trains in Boston in the old days, to working cranberry bogs, here when I was much older and should have known better. But that's my Boston roots.
That's awesome. Thank you. Jesse, what's yours?
Jesse, where's Jesse?
Bottom left.
I'm right here.
You're there, yeah.
I'm Jessie Thoma. I have a similar trajectory, I guess, to C. Spencer. I started in California, Northern California, though. I came out here for college, where Jane and I sort of knew each other, I guess. Similar friend circles, but never quite crossed paths. And then I met my wife in college, and I told her that I would follow her anywhere where if somebody called me sir, they wouldn't punch me in the face. They would just awkwardly say, sorry, and then walk away. So Rhode Island worked perfectly because people don't even stop to look at you. So they just say, all right, sir, and then just keep walking. So that worked just fine for us. So we're in Rhode Island now. And now we're in Rhode Island and can't leave because we're quarantined here and nobody wants Rhode Islanders. So a small state now feels even tinier. You can drive from one end to the other in 45 minutes, and then you can't actually cross the border. So yeah, a lot of my books are New England. I have a series that are like action movies in books, The Chase, Pedal to the Metal, and Data Capture, that are all set in Rhode Island in Providence. And then even ones that aren't explicitly set in New England, I certainly take inspiration from New England. My latest ones are Serenity, and then one's coming out I don't have yet is Courage. And they're based on the Serenity Prayer. So Serenity, Courage, and then Wisdom. I am writing now, so I can't show you the cover, but they're all set in New England, although I don't name where in New England they are.
Cool. Very cool. So my first question for y'all is twofold. You mentioned a little bit of this during the intro. Are any of your books set in New England? And if you think that how setting plays a role in the plot and the storyline and moving the story along. So I can go to you, Fiona. You want to go first again?
Yeah, sure. So, the most interesting thing about Boston, I think, is that it's got so many, or New England, is it's got all the seasons. So I think you have the opportunity to write so many different variations of stories. I have a Christmas novella coming out this year that's going to be based in a really nasty snowstorm in a bar. I'm writing, the next book in this series takes place at the beach. There's the Cape Cod is so close to where we are. So I think that this as an environment, it adds its own character to a lot of your stories, because there's so much history and there's so much charm in Boston and New England itself. So most of my books take place here. In the Bet Against Me, the Bet series, the high stakes romance series that I'm working on now, all takes place in Boston. And the entire idea is that circles around a group of friends that all work at this realty office, and they all have different experiences with Boston and the surrounding towns and cities and states, and really kind of what their experiences are and what they pull those back into. So for me, it's absolutely, it's not only a background, but it's a character. And I think that I've built a good portion of my brand on some of that, familiarity. I try to tie each character from all my books into something else and also bring that background to life. And I think that it's easy to do in a place that has so much charm and history. So
true. So true. That's what I love about it. Honestly, that's what I try. How about Jane? You want to go next? We'll go in a circle.
Sure. Yeah, so my first book, like I said, The Universe Between Us is set in a sort of near future Western Massachusetts. So we're talking like 2060s, 2070s. And that was a really interesting place for me to set it. I mean, I was always going to, so that was always going to be like part of the story. It didn't start out like that at all, being about what it is about, which is about a woman who is about to go on a trip to Mars, where she's going to basically be her entire life, like if she goes, and then she meets somebody who's a college student, and this woman Jolie is, she kind of has to Anna has to figure out if, like, she's going to stay for her or not, but also she's staying really for the farm that she has. So I love farming. I love gardening. I especially love apple orchards. So I was able to kind of set part of it in this like old overgrown apple orchard, sort of things that you find in New England, a little bit, and also in upstate New York, where like I said, I'm from. But yeah, I mean, just it gets in you, and the sort of the open space is sort of feels like opportunity. So I do always kind of go back to that, and I'm always like, yeah, I really want to live in that farmhouse in fake Amherst. So yeah.
Cool. Very cool. Holly. Is Holly here? Did she hop on? Let's go to Fritz. She must have lost her connection.
Yeah, as I said, I have two books that are set in New England. Obviously, that's Nantucket Rose, which really came out of my love of the island itself. I worked there for a while, and it's kind of hard to resist. And I guess I wanted give a reader what a feel for the island, what it would be like to, join me on this ferry ride and walk the streets and experience the feel of really old New England, about as old as it gets. And the other romance that I did was Night Voice, and that's Provincetown. And there was not a lot of research required to do a story about Provincetown. I guess I really wanted to do was let the reader come visit, come hang out and walk the streets, walk Commercial Street that we all know, so well. Experience the tight-knit community that it is, the feel of Provincetown. Fiona's right. I think New England is unique because you do have all 4 seasons, and it gives you that opportunity, to really hit each one of them, and it's like a blank slate. Any direction, any season you turn to, something's available. And you're not restricted. If I wanted to do a beach scene, I have Nantucket Rose, I'm on an island. No, it's, not Martinique, it's not Aruba. But you can do some serious surfing on Nantucket. The swimming and the sharks of Race Point or whatever. There's plenty of opportunity. In the wintertime in New England is, it's legendary. So I'm probably will be more based in New England for sure. Ollie?
Ollie, let's
Hi. Sorry, my computer froze up on me there. Got overheated. I have an old laptop, so. So yeah, actually, all 3 of my books are set in New Hampshire, my favorite place. So songs, I don't really specify a town, but it takes place in Seacoast, New Hampshire. And then these 2, Arrested Hearts was my second book, and Strings Attached is my third. Those both take place right in Portsmouth, which is probably my favorite town on earth. I love that place. So yeah, the settings are important. And I love that I've been able to reference even like specific streets, businesses, places that are dear to me that I know if anybody goes to these places, it's going to mean something to them. And touching on what Fiona said, as far as we have this great area where we can enjoy all 4 seasons, which can you can pick any season as a part of the book, and like the weather is going to end up being a factor. How the characters feel in certain places and types of weather and that kind of thing. So, and just the whole, even just some of the dialect you can use, it's wicked awesome and things like that. Things that are definitely New England speak that people can either they love it because they're from here, or you make sure that the readers they'll know where it takes place just because of things like that, and touching base on those little quirky little things about New England that are unique to this area.
Jesse, how about you?
All right, there's one in every crowd. It's going to be me. New England is charming. I obviously take full advantage of all of New England's things, but I've been told that my books live in the fringes of polite society. So I love all of the history of New England, maybe the less polite history of New England, Rhode Island's mob scene, and the stuff that makes the news maybe for not the best reasons. It's probably the work that I do. I've done addiction and behavioral medicine research for 15 years. So I meet all kinds of people. I've been in methadone clinics in the state prison, So I've seen a lot of the less polite society, I suppose. So I like that type of history of New England as well, the stuff that doesn't make the postcards. So a lot of my books kind of touch on that. I like to tell stories that aren't often told, I think. They're not the apple orchards, which I love visiting, but I'm not good at telling those stories, so I don't try. I leave those to Jane. But I like to tell stories about people who maybe aren't often represented in our type of books. So in Serenity, I have a story about a woman who's in active recovery from a heroin addiction. Because I feel like those stories often aren't told or aren't told well. It's very black and white, and that's just not the reality for most people. So, so that's one of the books that I've written. Still being set in New England, because that's a national problem, but this one happens to be set in New England.
Topics, definitely important.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's not heavy and dark though. People worry about that.
Yeah, because I think I read your one, Serenity. I think before I was even published, and yeah, it's still a romance. So.
Yeah, there's a drug dealer named the Zookeeper, so it can't be that serious.
Yeah. So how far have you gone in the name of research? And I'll start with Frizz on this one. I'll kind of go around.
Oh boy.
Historical fiction really caps it all. I mean, I like historical romance, historical fiction, yes, most of all. And I started with Stick, the Prohibition years, and that really, I mean, it stuck me right into it. You've got as deep in research, I suppose, as you can go. Because I knew very little about it, so I found out. But everything from, from cocktails to music to clothes to weather, was quite a few months before I was headstrong. I'm on my way. I'm writing this novel, and boom, you stop because you can't take another step. You're not even dressed yet. You don't know what clothes to put on. I mean, you invest yourself right away in historical fiction.
She writes
the new one
naked, is
coming
what
out, Measure of Devotion, is the Civil War. And that was about 10 or 12 months and a lot of books of research. And I guess going to Gettysburg, about as far as I've gone literally for research, literally walk out onto the battlefield itself. This was pretty heavy. It was very heavy, and kind of really slammed the idea home that this has to be written in a special way. So it's just meant all the more research. It's like a catch-22. But it does have an end. I mean, the war does come to an end, thank God. So the book did come to an end. But there's a lot of research. I guess going as far as Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, is as far as I've gone so far.
Yeah. Cool.
I want to hear what Laney has to say. Tell me something good, Laney.
Well, I'm just going to circle back to the first question to say that my books were, my first two books are set in 2 different New England states. I've lived in 4 of the 6 New England states. I grew up about a half hour north of Boston, lived there for my first 18 years, and then lived in a log house in the woods in New Hampshire for a while, moved over to the coast of Maine, then met my wife and moved to Vermont 12 years ago. So my books are kind of doing the same thing. My first book, A Chapter on Love, was set in New Hampshire near the seacoast in the Portsmouth area. So my characters they might have run into Holly's characters over there. And
one of them's a cop. Did she arrest any of your characters?
No, they're all law-abiding women.
Oh, that's good.
And my second book, The Real Thing, that came out this past April, was set in Vermont and a little bit of Western Massachusetts, Jane. So they may have bumped into one or two of Jane's characters. You don't know. You never know what'll happen. The book I'm working on is set on the coast of Maine.
Nice.
And just starting on that one. It's one woman is a landscape architect and who's all work and no play. And the other character is a librarian who has recently come out and is divorced and is kind of sort of raring to go. So they bump into each other up on the coast of Maine.
Yay, librarians.
Good.
Yay, librarians.
Cool. You want to do the second question? How far you've gone, have you gone in the name of research?
Geez, that's kind of a tricky question. There's a scene in my first book that takes place in a lean-to in a deserted campground. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
You have to read the book to find out.
Keys.
So Jane, what about you? How far have you gone in the name of research?
Not super far, mostly reading. I have this awesome book. I saw this guy talk. His name is Stefan Alexander, and he is this Black physicist who used to be a jazz musician. Jazz music and sort of quantum physics and stuff plays a pretty big role in my Portal series, which are Uninvited and Convergence. And that informed my book a lot. Just that, like, you can sort of, you know, read the universe in terms of music, especially jazz, so anyway, I would highly recommend that for any nerds who need something to fall asleep to. But I would say, like, physical distance wise, one time I went home and my parents drove me around to there's a sonar station that's like run by the US Navy on Seneca Lake, which is also where this takes place. It has to do with, the story has to do with like sound and like opening up a portal to another universe through sound. So that was like pretty interesting to, you know, kind of not see because you can't really get anywhere close to it. But it was like cool to take a drive around the lake. It's really pretty. So yeah, that's about as far as I've gone.
Jane, I have a question. How the hell did you learn all that stuff?
Learn all what stuff?
I mean, you're dealing with a physicist and portals and wow, where'd you get all that?
Books.
That's a lot of reading.
You know what? I love me some Brian Greene, and like, yeah, I've always loved reading books about astrophysics and like
Oh,
stuff like that. I know.
oh, Jane.
Light reading. Just some light reading.
Light reading. Yeah.
Astrophysics.
He likes the library.
All right.
Fiona, you must have something good.
So like, are we talking about like
Whatever you want.
Okay. So I will say that I had really enjoyed my 20s in college. So I really experienced most of my life and continue to experience it regularly. So a lot of the scenes in my books are definitely things that I've tried out or at least have put some effort into.
Woo!
In Strike a Match, I wrote about glass blowing. I took a few glass blowing classes. You know, I've traveled as far as the Bahamas and Bermuda. I actually went down to Bermuda for a wedding. So my last book before this series started was Not Since You, and it took place on a lesbian cruise to Aruba. So I've been there for sure. I spent a lot of time in Aruba. I spent a lot of time on the cruise ship. I had an opportunity to get tours, and that's how I made it to feel like it was more of its own character, the ship itself. I took a lot of time on that cruise mapping out that story. I had a lot of downtime because we were there for a wedding and I had an 18-month-old. So if you've ever been on a cruise ship, when you have a small child, you know that it's not for small children. So you are doing a lot of adventures on your own, like wandering around with your kid when she won't sleep. So I got to see a lot of the ships and a lot of the insides of the ship. And I have had the opportunity I have a friend who's a pilot. So in the third book that's coming up, I'm going to be writing about flying a little bit, and I have a book based in Cape Cod about spotter pilots that'll be out soon, next year maybe. So I really try to put myself, if possible, into the experiences. The most recent series I'm working on is a realtor series. My mother was a realtor for 30 years. So I have a lot of immediate exposure with that and the business and kind of how that goes. So I definitely will put my toe into everything. I'll try everything pretty much once, and I'll do my best to represent it on the page, but I'm adventurous that way. I'll do it. Sure. I'll try it. I'll go anywhere. Where do you want me to go? I was on a private plane once. I wrote about that, like, yeah, sure. Let's share a story. I'm cool with that.
I knew yours would be good. So what's your favorite part of writing? What's your least favorite? I'm going to switch it up. Jane, let's start with you.
Okay, but I want to know first how far you've gone.
All right. You tried to skip over that. You and Jesse tried to scoot under the radar. We noticed.
Well, I haven't answered any because I'm the host.
Oh.
I've walked the streets of Northampton.
Oh, Chris Bryant knows the answer.
Oh, God.
All right, fess up. Now you gotta tell us.
She'll out you.
Nothing. Nothing. Let's go to Jane. What's your favorite?
But we're just gonna have to guess. Okay. What was the question?
Favorite part
He's
of writing,
distracted.
and what's your least favorite part of writing?
My favorite part is when I have already written something.
Mhm.
And my least favorite part is being able to, like, making myself sit down to write it. I'm not even kidding. I've written about 1,000 words since the pandemic, and I've read about 1,000 words too. So my brain is like shrinking inside my head.
I hear you, Jane.
I actually had kind of the reverse reaction. So the pandemic brought me home, and I'm not usually home as much. I usually work a lot of hours, like 50, 60 hours a week before I have to do paperwork. So I've been super productive in the writing department in between hanging out with my kids. So I have done 2 books and a novella this year. But only to distract myself by how terrible the world is. So for me, it's a matter of escapism and getting away from all the bad stuff. It's easy to live in my own world because I know what's going to happen in that world, and that's sometimes comforting. But I've been able to write more things than usual. I haven't been able to read, but that's only because I'm writing when I'm not also teaching my children things because they're no longer at school. So different experience.
Laney, what's your favorite? Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Are you muted? I think you're
Here
muted.
we go.
You got it.
Welcome back.
Hi, Holly. And Holly's come back too. Holly's been kind of popping in and out. Hi, Holly. My favorite part is editing, when it's all done, and then I can go in and I can kind of, turn things, and yeah, I really like that. I have a lot of fun with that. The hardest part, of the part I don't like, yes, Chris Bryant is saying editing. Yeah, I really like to just get in there and yeah. But the middle, when I'm writing, when I get to that middle, that's a tough part for me. I will try to avoid that. I'll be, I don't know, taking a toothbrush and getting dust out of the corners of someplace. And my wife's like, what are you doing? Didn't you say you were writing? And yeah, so it's a lot of procrastination that goes on during the middle of the book. What about Jesse?
I also really like editing. I have a great editor, so I always know she'll make my book so much better than whatever I hand to her.
I second that.
Yeah, even if she tells me to rewrite the whole thing in a week and a half, which I am not ashamed to admit she's done before. But yeah, the worst part is when you have been procrastinating so much because you don't like the writing or whatever is going wrong, and then you realize that you have like a month before the deadline to turn the thing in, and you still have like 50,000 words to write. Yeah, that's the worst part, I think. Or getting to the point where you're in the middle and it's a slog and you think that everything you've written is terrible and you don't like trust that you're on the right track. That's usually when my wife says, stop what you're doing, start from the beginning, read it over. And then if you need to make a change, do that. But you probably are going to be fine. You just stop wandering around the house, beating yourself up, and just read it. Good to have her to do that for me.
What, Holly?
Yeah, I enjoy editing as well. And I'm fortunate, I have the same editor as Jesse, so that's why we we have a fantastic writing teacher to work with. But as far as the writing process itself, I love when you get to kind of that a quarter of or a third of the way through where I'm really starting to get a feel for the characters and who they are. And seeing the chemistry between them really start to develop as you're developing the romance, and seeing them having to start to work on overcoming their baggage or their issues or whatever they need to get through. And I kind of love that. Where, I mean, they really start to drive the story, and they a lot of times take it in directions I don't see coming. Scenes will pop up just out of conversations or a place they go or something like that, and it's a fun adventure for me. So I'm hoping that the reader enjoys that same part of the process as well.
Editing, writing.
Frizz, let's go. Tell me a
I
story.
couldn't hear. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time hearing Camille.
How about you? What are your favorite parts and what are your least favorite parts?
Favorite parts. I think introducing a new character to the reader, when it's time to introduce the sidekick or the romantic, the partner, the romantic interest. Just the very first time the reader lays eyes on her, it's all new, and you've got free reign, to just bring in somebody brand new. It's a challenge to put the character you have in your head there explicitly for the reader. I guess it's kind of a weird situation because you want the reader to be able to form their own image. But you have, if you read, going back over it like editing, everybody says they kind of like that part. I like going over my own work to make sure I'm number one, because I've got the basics down and that's out of the way. I can go back over it and see if it strikes me the same way I want it to strike the reader. And I think the most difficult part I have, one of the difficult parts in writing, is the beginning. The intro, that first sentence, first paragraph, first few paragraphs, maybe the first scene. And I think it's the old journalist in me that keeps me going back and being my own worst editor, never satisfied with it. And I'll put something down because I like it, and then about 2,000 or 3,000 words later, I'll stop and look back again. It's like, no, and then rewrite it. And I mean, at 20,000 words, I may stop and just check the beginning again for the heck of it. And I don't like that again. I don't know how many times I will rework a beginning, even when I'm near the end. It's tough to be satisfied with it. It's a frustration that drives me crazy.
Do you write that first? A lot of people write the first page last.
No, I write it first.
Write it first.
Although it's one of the last things I touch.
Yeah.
And that it's so aggravating because I get impatient with myself. This should have been done right from the beginning, but that isn't always the way it works. The story by that time, halfway through at least, can be telling you something different and maybe pointing you. We may want to point the reader in a slightly different direction, or maybe you found out something about the characters by now that need to be indicated or hinted at the very beginning.
Yeah, the beginning's always the toughest part too, just because if you don't grab the reader right away within that first chapter or two, they might not want to keep going. So that's why it's so critical.
You know, what strikes me is that
Get it right.
from prides, going to prides with all of us. I mean, we stand there at the booth or at a festival or whatever, and
Yeah.
someone will come up and they'll pick up a book and they'll look at the back blurb. And we all hate that, the blurb, writing them. But then maybe they'll open it and they'll read the first page. And like you said, Holly, I mean, you've got that moment in time, especially at like a pride thing. They're just going to stand there for maybe a minute, if that. How much are they going to grasp? So you've got that much to really catch them beyond the blurb. If they're interested enough to go to the first page, you better make it stick. You know, it's important.
I have a couple of questions from the chat that I was going to just pose to the group, and whoever wants to take it and run, go ahead. Heidi asked, how much do you find yourself fighting the characters and what direction they want to go in your stories?
Anyone want to jump on that? Jane?
Sure. I find this concept like really interesting because to me, when I write, like I'm their god. So like they don't go in other directions. They go in the direction that I and I'm also, I will say I'm more of a plotter than a pantser. So I wonder if this is a plotter versus pantser, meaning that you plot out your book versus just kind of write whatever comes to mind. I wonder if it's that kind of a thing, and I would be interested to hear that from other folks.
I write whatever comes to mind, and wherever it goes, it goes. So wherever the character is going to go, I go with it. And that usually is my best writing, is whenever it just kind of goes somewhere. Don't fight it.
Well, I'll spend a lot of time like writing down tons of notes on who these people are when I first start writing, but then they surprise me, and I end up just kind of going with what feels right at the time as I'm writing the characters. And sometimes it's their interaction with other characters that different parts of their personality might come through. And then it's odd because I might go back and read those notes when I'm halfway through writing it and they've turned out very different, but it's working. So I just go with it.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a pantser. I plot very little. And I think in the process, just going on what Holly said too, that the process of I'm discovering a lot about the character as I'm writing the character. And so it will seem sometimes that things take a turn that I hadn't expected because I haven't plotted that out. So things will take a bit of a turn and it would be a little unexpected. And sometimes it's either I think that's okay, we're going to do that, or no, that's not the direction that I want to go in. But sometimes there is a bit of a, you know, what do you want to do that for? That's not the person I had in my head, but that's the person that the character has developed into as I've been writing the character.
Yeah, or sometimes you end up writing a scene that you didn't originally plan to write, but it just kind of worked itself in. And how is that character going to react or respond in that situation? And it might be different than what you anticipated or planned. As long as it works and feels authentic, then I leave it. I just I let the characters drive the story.
There have been times when I've said to my wife, I didn't know it was going to go there. I didn't know she was going to say that. I didn't know it was going to end up here. And sometimes I think you just have to let it sit, like you said, Holly, and see if let it ride and see if it works. Go back to it the next day. It's no, what was I thinking? Then you change it. But sometimes it's, it was meant to be.
I have another question from Captain Marvel to everyone. Have any major social issues that are happening now affected your works in progress?
They have for me. a lot of the protests around police brutality and just a greater awareness of the way that we police in this country actually completely changed the way that I approached the book that's going to come out in April, Courage. It was going to be very much like, there is a police officer in this story, but the story is very much about the other main character who's a ride-along mental health clinician attached to the police department. But it just suddenly didn't feel like you could just have a police officer as a character anymore. So I really changed a lot of the way that I plotted that book, and a lot of that character's thinking and the way that she kind of moved through the world because of kind of the social climate, which I fully admit I have the privilege of not having to have thought about that much before. And it was fine for me to just have a police officer character, but I was really glad that I was able to go a little bit deeper and was kind of forced to think about this in a much different way. I think it's a much better book. And it's certainly one that I'm a lot prouder of than I think I would have been before. Frizz, I know Measure of Devotion is impacted by what's going on now.
Yeah, Measure of Devotion is, granted, stepping on the battlefield over a year ago, was one thing. And then our whole world changed. And all of a sudden, what I was in the middle of writing was, let's say, timely. And I never expected it, have that kind of impact on me, let alone hopefully some readers. Civil War and women's rights, equality, justice. I mean, that's what it was all about, just back up 58 years ago. Now here I am with, a female soldier in the middle of it all, faced with everything that was wrong about this country in this, in 1863. Yeah, it stopped me. It made me read a lot more, as if I didn't have a mountain already to read. It brought in the Gettysburg Address front and center, really front and center. We just want to take it sometimes and slap it on somebody's face. You hear, if you can't listen to it, see it, and I guess that's what I tried to do. It's in the middle of a romance or with a romance, which is kind of bizarre, but I think it works.
So we're at actually with about 5 minutes or so left to go. It's been a really quick hour, and I wanted to just kind of open it up to questions from anyone who's attending. And if there are no questions, we have kind of a quick little lightning round that C. Spencer is going to do with folks. So we'll see. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I think I got every question that was in the chat. So why don't you start the lightning round, and if questions come up, we'll make sure that we get them.
That's good. So, favorite apple variety? Fiona.
Macintosh.
Jane.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Dave, which doesn't make any sense. My home state, Empire.
Oh, Friz.
Delicious.
Jesse.
It used to be called a pink lady, but it's called something different. It's when you cut into it, the flesh is pink. My grandfather used to grow them.
Oh. Ollie.
Does apple pie count?
Yeah.
Cortland's or Granny Smith's are fine, but
I like Macoons.
Oh yes, Laney. McCoons.
Macoons.
Account?
Macoun, Macoon. Debate that.
Is it good?
Funniest word in the
And-
Boston accent, guys. Let me go with Frizz.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Funniest word in the Boston accent.
Oh, geez, you know,
Yeah,
I had practiced this. I had practiced. What's it called? Yeah, parking the car at the Packy.
awesome.
Packy.
At the
At the
Packy.
At the package
Packy.
store. Do you know what a package store is? If you're not from New England, you probably don't know what a package store is.
Is it?
Liquor store? Yeah.
Store.
Buy booze.
The liquor store is the Packy.
Okay. Fiona, funniest word in the Boston accent.
I mean, Wicked Smart is probably my favorite.
That's right.
Jesse.
You actually need to go with the Rhode Island accent, which is the best or worst, depending on what you feel, of Boston and New York put together. But Rhode Islanders have a tendency to drop the R, except when they feel like adding it. So the other day, my daughter was telling me about how she listened to Willy Wonka.
Oh,
Yeah, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Willy Wonka.
Nice.
Yeah, they just throw R's onto the end of whatever they feel like.
Better than a hot wiener.
Next time when Rhode Island is open for business, everybody has to come. We're going to get hot wieners.
Okay.
Bring your antacids.
I don't know. Dave.
Awesome.
Oh, did I do yours? No, I didn't do yours.
Awesome.
What is it?
Awesome.
What is
No idea
that?
what you're saying.
So bad. Nobody even knows what it is.
No, I grew up here.
Just told by my, okay, it's horsehair. And
Oh, horsehair.
Crosshair.
Horsehair.
Crosshair.
Yeah.
No idea what he was talking about. Anyway, sorry. That's not like
Crosshair. Yeah.
I like fluffernutter,
There you go.
Banana.
That's a good one.
but in Vermont, the word that gets me in the most trouble is the word for, you know, in your cabinet when you pull the thing out and it has your silverware in it. I grew up calling it a drawer.
A draw?
Draw.
Yeah.
It's
Open the drawer.
There's no ER at the end.
It's a drawer.
It's a drawer.
Ah.
And up in Vermont, they don't call it a drawer. So
They call it a shelf with a handle.
okay, I'll go ahead. I'll go with just get that out of the drawer. And they so, but they do add they add R's, kind of like Rhode Island. Vermont adds R's, and my wife says the word garage with about 7 R's in the word. So,
Does she say idea? I had an idea.
she doesn't. No,
Yes. See, we call it a garage here, so there you go.
a garage.
That's a
Jamaica
good one.
Plain.
they don't.
Garage.
Holly, what about you?
Well, I confuse people because I had a mother from Iowa and a father from Massachusetts, so I didn't really develop much of a New England accent. But I don't know, one of my favorite things, just for a saying, is Yankees suck. But I had one of the things I always, a great memory when I was in 10th grade biology class, our biology teacher had us looking at slides through microscope. And she said, hey, if you look carefully, you might see some amoebas in your bacterias. And that's, I don't know. Otherwise, everything's wicked awesome.
So Laney, I bet I know your answer to this. Ben and Jerry's or Dunkin'?
I think I have to say Ben and Jerry's. Could
Frizz,
be run out of the state if I don't.
you're Ben and Jerry's? Frizz?
Yes, Ben and Jerry's, absolutely.
Cool. Jesse? Ben and
I
Jerry's,
don't know.
Dunkin'.
What's the question?
Maybe Duncan.
Ben and Jerry's or Dunkin'? What's your preference?
Duncan, I guess.
Dunkin'.
Well, you can't get one at the other, so you gotta have both.
Can't pick both. You have to-
And with
I gotta
Holly.
have my coffee though. I guess I'll go with Dunkin's.
Fiona?
I'm a Dunks girl, sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, but I'm truly in Boston, so we have JP Licks here. So
Oh, yeah.
That's local. That's local to here. So, or you know, Brigham. That's local here too. So,
Brigham.
stay in my state.
Jane, what's your answer?
Well, I would say, yeah, like Holly said, you can't just pick one, but also I don't like coffee or donuts, so I mean, I guess.
Ben and Jerry's.
Fiona has to run. That's why I'm waving. Bye, Fiona.
Sorry,
Bye,
guys. Have a great
Fiona.
night.
Hi, Fiona.
Thank you for having me.
Coming.
Thank you for
Good to see
coming.
you.
So that's all lightning round I have. Do we have any questions from the audience or?
No, we didn't get any questions during the audience during that. So I'm thinking everybody is questionless, satisfied.
This was fun.
It was
So-
very,
It was really
Good to see everybody.
yeah.
Yes.
Really good to
everybody.
see.
Right.
Really good to see folks. And thank you to everyone who came tonight for taking time, having a little bit of a respite from everything else that's going on and talking about books and romance and New England. And it was a lot of fun. Just as a reminder, there is a sale on all the New England authors you saw here, all of our books. I've posted the link in the chat. I'll post it one more time. And you can also find the link if you go follow any of our social media. I'm sure the link will pop up there. The sale runs until midnight tonight. Everyone have a great weekend. And thanks so much.
So much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you soon, I hope.
See you soon.